Did something change there? And I can tell you nothing's changed. They've been chlorinating the water just like always. Have we done something differently that has caused this problem? I can tell you, no, we haven't done anything differently. It's one of those things that we'll definitely prepare for in the future. You know, we've been giving out water, buying water from WC for many, many years. This is the first time that an issue like this happened. So I'm sure we'll delve deeper into it to make sure that this does not happen again in the future. But if you ask me who's to blame for it, I can tell you, really, at this point, and I don't know if there is nobody to say, okay, we can point a finger to a person. This is just a fluke situation that happens with, what is the new word that I learned? Nitrification, or nitrification. And so that is a word that happens when things like that happen. And so it's just something, you know, and again, it's things that I think in the future we will be able to prepare. We're going through this chlorination process that I think is going to prepare us for it so that something like this doesn't happen again, getting rid of that ammonia. And as you can see, it's not just affect us as a city, but it affects all the surrounding cities. You know, everybody that buys water from the WCID. So from my part, you know, they're doing a good job out there. We're still buying water. It's a partnership that we've had for many years, and a lot of people say, well, do you guys think you should do that on your own? If we ever did something like that, you know, we, as a city council, as a mayor, I think that we create these partnerships so that we can, you know, lower the cost to our citizens. And to build a plant on your own, it would be so costly that you can imagine how high these bills, these water bills would have to go up just to do that. So I think that that was brought up, you know, do you guys think that you guys should do something on your own? I think that if we ever delved into something like that and just try to see if that's something that would be doable, I bet you, I can tell you right now, it would just be astronomical, the cost of that, because, you know, being in partnership with Fort Hood and all the surrounding cities that buy partner, that's what keeps the cost and these water rates down. So what I'll do now is I'll let Mr. Reynolds give you an update, and then when he's done, then we'll open it up to questions. You can ask me or Mr. Reynolds any of the questions, maybe something that we have not covered. So with that, Mr. Reynolds?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Real quick, since the council meeting on Tuesday night, I think we gave a thorough update on Tuesday night for all the outlets that was there. Since that time, this morning, we released about half the city off the boil water notice, what we call the lower pressure plane, which is about 35,000 addresses that can now go back to not boiling water on the eastern side of the city, going north to south. Those locations have been released. Again, it's about 35,000 residents has been affected by that, lifting that boil water notice. So that's a good news story. We got all of our test samples at the lab right now for the upper pressure plane, the airport pressure plane. Those should be back tomorrow morning. If all is favorable in those, we'll be releasing the rest of the city at that time. That will be around 11 o'clock, between 11 and 12 tomorrow. So look forward to that. We're all looking forward to getting beyond this, getting this behind us. We just want to, again, thank the public for their patience during this process. And we're going to get through this. We're going to be fine. The water is, as the mayor said, we've got a great partnership with WCID. We're going to continue that relationship. And we're going to continue to build and see what we can do better in the future. So this whole process has brought a lot of things that we can do better on both sides to make sure this never happens again. All right?
All right. And so with that, we're open for questions.
Will this, the situation of the boil water notice have an impact once these water bills come?
No. Not at all. I mean, this is, anytime we raise rates or something like that, it has to come before the council. And so at this point, you know, water bills remain the same. We're not going to see any increase because of this. Everybody's getting water. There was nobody that was disconnected. And as was mentioned here during the council, you know, people that get water, what's happening is a lot of that water that's come out, including to my house, there is chlorine in it. You know, it's just not at the level that TCEQ requires. So we have to issue that boiled water notice, because I know I've gotten calls and people think it's some kind of poisonous water or something like that. So somebody even mentioned, has anybody got sick? I have not heard of anybody get sick. I don't think anybody will get sick because of this. So people are still taking showers. They're still doing laundry. You can still do everything that you're required. So the city is still issuing out water. It's just that when it comes to drinking it, what we want you to do is make sure that you boil it for at least two minutes. If you're cooking with it, you know, most of the time when you use it for cooking, you're going to boil it anyway. So that's the thing. It's just that, you know, so the water is still coming out. We're not going to see any increases because of this. So, yes.
The new treatment that's all chlorine and not chlorine plus ammonia is filtering down through the system. People are already starting to notice a strong chlorine.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it safe to drink that water if they're still smelling what smells like a swimming pool?
Well, once the boil, because in certain areas, you see that smell, and it happened to my house, and my wife says, there's some fish, some smells. And I said, that's that chlorination. But remember, we're still under the boil water, so I would not drink it. The only areas that are safe to drink is the ones that we lifted the boil water notice. And I don't know, Mr. Reynolds, if some areas of that are still going to have that chlorination smell on it or not. But as long as that boil water notice is lifted, what that means, TCEQ has tested it, and they've come back and said, you know what, you can now drink it. Me personally, I always use bottled waters. We have filters, even with water that we use from the city. But it's going to be safe as long as that water boil notice is lifted. And thank you for mentioning that, because I just want to clarify, a lot of times people say that chlorination process is going to last about 30 days. It doesn't mean that the lift boil water is going to last 30 days. As you just heard today from Mr. Reynolds, part of that has already been lifted. But that chlorination process, that new chemicals that are going there, it's going to last, I think, what was it, November 21st. So you still have to, we still have to go through and get rid of some of that old water. And so that's going to last, you know, another three weeks or so before we do that. So.
Mr. Reynolds, can you speak to the subject and kind of help clarify to the public what the process is and why they might be smelling the chlorine so strong?
Yes, when you're going from a chloramine system, which is having the ammonia mixed with the chlorine that goes into our chloramine system that we're normally operating under, and you switch that to a full chlorine system, and you do the chlorine conversion, as that's happening through the system, you're going to get that. That was expected. It was part of the process. We knew that going into it. And it's not just the city of Killeen that's dealing with that smell. It's all cities that gets their water from WCID. But if you're not under a boil water notice, that water is perfectly fine to drink. It's perfectly fine to shower in. That's just part of the process of the water switching from the chloramine system to the full chlorine system. That smell is going to come, that full, strong pool water smell that you're getting, but the water is perfectly safe. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Will the city be doing after-action investigation, or will you be contracting for the outside?
Well, we haven't decided that. That's going to be entirely up to the council, you know, what they decide. You know, they haven't said anything about that. I think that, you know, we have the confidence in our staff at this point. You know, we haven't seen anything. I'm clear as to why, you know, unless something else comes and says, you know what, we think that there may be some kind of change or something happen. At this point, I don't see why we would have to do something like that. Yes, ma'am.
What kind of steps will the city take to prepare for such an event like this in the future? How can we avoid ending up in a similar boil water like this in the future?
And that's a good question. And Mr. Reynolds, I'll let him explain that, because he came before the city council and he had a few steps that he gave us an update. So.
Yes, through this process, anytime you go through an event like this, you want to figure out what went right, what went wrong, what can we do better going forward, not just for the city of Killeen, but for all entities involved, and that was everybody coming off the WCID water system. One of the things we're learning is one of the key factors to this is going to help out is make sure we're doing a full chlorine conversion on an annual basis, or at least a biannual basis. So the chlorine conversion that we're doing right now, what it's designed to do is to push out any bacteria, any negatives that are in that system, distribution wide. So everything that WCID will push out on an annual basis, if we go to an annual clean, that's what will happen, which would absolutely prevent this from happening in the future. And talking to TCQ, all systems that, most public water systems do a full chlorine conversion on an annual basis as part of their maintenance. So if we go to that process, to this point, they have had no history of a city having a repeat situation like this once the conversion is done on an annual basis, part of your annual maintenance. So that way we can give predictability to the public as to what's coming. You're going to get that chlorine smell at a certain time of the year. You know when it's coming, and we can make this part of the maintenance, but that'd be something we're talking to WCID about. Another thing that we're doing on our side is, as you probably heard from others throughout this whole process, is that other cities are doing what we call boosting their chlorine levels at their stations, adding chlorine on the backside once they get the water from WCID. That was not the practice of the city of Killeen. Our practice was if we saw issues, deep cycle the tanks. That means brings the tanks down to a very low level, bring them back up, flush out that water, and then the water is tested again and it's safe to move forward. And that's an accepted practice from the TCEQ. So what we're doing now, in conjunction with that process, we actually have already added 3 boosting stations at our lift stations so we can boost our chlorine levels as well on the backside. So that's what we're doing to try to mitigate these issues, and that's what we're being guided through this process by the experts to do.
Okay, you mentioned a little bit ago that the rest of the city samples have been sent out already, is that correct?
That's right.
They should come back within 24 hours of sending them out, right?
Yes, sir.
So hopefully by early afternoon tomorrow?
The last samples arrived at the lab this morning at 10:41. So sometime tomorrow after 10:41, we should get clearance from the biochem lab that we use down in West Texas. Once we get that, the samples are sent to us. They're also sent to TCQ. TCQ will review them and give us the green light to go ahead and lift the notice. Today, that process only took about 20 minutes from the time the TCQ got it to the time they gave us the green light to lift the notice, and we did so immediately. And we already prepped to do that. If that comes back positively, our communication department, working with Public Works, we're prepared to lift that notice as soon as we get the green light to do that.
For people like me, not really good with math, so what is the eastern part of the city for those 35 years?
It's a lot of the eastern side of Business 190 going towards the older part of town. But if you look on the website, we got a map on there, and we also have a list of the addresses on there. If you can't find your address on there, you can call. I'll give you a number right now. You can call to get that. Okay, you can call 254-616-3181 if you can't find your address on there, and they will actually look it up for you. All right, we have staff that's ready to do that. But that map is on the website, and you can look at that map and kind of tell where the delineation line is. So you're going to see the green portion of that map is going to be the portion that has been cleared from the boil water notice. That's on the website, as well as a list of the 35,000 addresses. Okay?
Can you clarify to the public one more time the difference between the conversion of old water to the new treated water and when the boil water notice will be lifted? Because that's the confusion I keep hearing from the public.
For his
Time.
timeline. Well, we started this conversion last Thursday. Last Thursday at 1:20 is when the conversion started. It takes about 24 hours for it to hit everybody's system and start working. The timeline for the entire conversion is going to be a 30-day process because we want to make sure everything is cleaned out. That has nothing to do with the timeline for our boil water notice. That's a totally separate thing. The conversion itself, once it got started, that's controlled by WCID with oversight from the TCEQ, but that's a 30-day process just to make sure we push everything out of those lines throughout the distribution system. Our distribution system, we've been pulling samples since the conversion started happening at our system. So once we got the 0.5 rating that we was looking for that's required by TCEQ, we started pulling samples and sending to the lab. That first batch came back last night. Everything tested great for that. We had no coliform, no anything in that water, and so we was able to lift that boil water notice. That same process has happened over the last day and a half to get those samples down for the rest of the city to get that part of the city off of the boil water notice.
One thing I heard at Tuesday's meeting, and please correct me if I'm explaining it wrong, is you were talking about that it was because of the changes in the use of water from a lot of people, that a lot of the water was sitting in the tanks a little longer. Could you explain a little bit more to that?
It's a lot of factors that go into the reason we test water on a daily basis. And yes, usage rate makes a difference. During the spring, summer months, you're watering your grass, we're filling pools, kids out of school. It's a lot of folks using water, so it's a lot of water usage going on. Once the fall hits and the students go back to school, the weather cools off, the usage rate go way down. If you have water coming in that's fluctuating in the numbers that we need to see, they sit in that tank for a long time and it's not flushed through the system by use. The longer it sit, the more time you got for that chlorine to dissipate throughout that tank, and you lose the ability to disinfect that water. That's what brings your residuals down. So that's why when I say we deep cycle those tanks, we take them down and we let them fill back up. Then you got fresh water in there. So that's what the deep cycling is for.
And you know, with that being said, why hasn't that been an issue in the past? That's something we can kind of point to and then say, well, this was different than the years prior to.
I think you got a system that we had not done a chlorination conversion before. And as I stated earlier, most systems do that on an annual basis. Because we hadn't done that, it's a lot of factors. That the water changing, they got what they call turning the lake. At this time of the year in the lake, if you go by a still house now, you'll smell that strong stench of sulfur and all that coming. The lake is turning. That means that when the temperatures came down and the top of the layer of the water got cool, that bottom layer, which is warmer than the top layer, kind of flips over. And when you do that, you get a lot of organisms, everything from the bottom that comes up to the top. That's why you get that stench out there. But all that water, we're still taking it from the lake to disinfect and send to the distribution system. So it's a lot of things that could have played. So there's no one thing that we can pinpoint. Even talking to the TCQ, there's not been one thing that you can pinpoint and say this caused this. It's just over time, when you got a system that's this complex, things are going to happen. It happens to the best of us. You buy a new car, you can get a recall on it in 6 months. Trust me, I've done it. So that can happen in any situation. That's exactly what we saw here on this right here.
Can you explain why Killeen hasn't done chlorine conversion before and other surrounding cities are?
Well, years back, probably 10 years ago, I want to say, they was actually doing like well, for the conversion, that conversion is a distribution wire conversion coming from WCID. We've done like spot conversions within tanks. We did it one last year at McMillan tanks, where you bring them down, you deep clean them, you do it. So we've done those isolated conversions. When they got the data from the entire distribution system, it was determined by the TCQ that we need to do a distribution-wide conversion. That's why we're going through the distribution-wide conversion. So the conversion piece, yes, we've done that. Every city's probably done that isolated conversions within their city, where they what they call a deep cleaning of the tanks, okay? You probably hear some cities call it burning the tanks, but it's just basically bringing the tanks down, cleaning them, and bringing them back up. We've done that to several tanks within the city in isolated incidents, but we haven't done that distribution-wide, which is what was the need to fix this issue this time.
Okay, so maybe my question would have been better to say, why hasn't Killeen been doing chlorine boosting like all the other surrounding cities?
And that's what I thought she was headed with it. But it wasn't a practice that we do. The TCQ allows you to, when you fill out your nitrification action plan, okay, which is how you're going to respond to your residual numbers going down at any given time, because residual numbers go up and down. Part of our plan was to deep clean the tanks, do the deep cycling on the tanks, flush. So we didn't add chlorination on the other side of that, because what we didn't want to do was over-chlorinate the water. We always had that concern. So we didn't do that. Other cities went that route, and they've gotten better at it. When we look at it now, we look at what we can do better. That's something that we can add there, but we're still going to go the deep cycling route before we go just automatically boosting, because you don't want to put too much chlorine in that system going to the residents. Okay?
The infrastructure? Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's something that we as a council have talked about, our old infrastructure. That needs to be updated, but as far as I know, that had nothing to do with it. You know, the infrastructures is the pipelines and stuff like that. So I don't think that has to do anything, even though that is something that the council is looking to fix. And, you know, there's a lot of things that need to be updated. And I just also want to make clear that, you know, because a lot of times people say, you know, they just charged us more for our water bill. There's a $10 charge on your water bill. Keep in mind that has nothing to do with water. That $10 is for our street maintenance fees, because those are also deteriorating, especially when we had another surprise that we've never had in 30 years back in February with those winter storms. And so we had to prepare for that. And so that $10 on your water bill has nothing to do with the water itself. It's for street maintenance fee. And I just want to follow up on a question somebody asked earlier about investigation and things like that. But you hear a lot about TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. And that is the authority. I mean, that is the state authority that could come in, and if you're doing something wrong, guess what? They can shut you down. They can make you boil your water. And so they've come in and basically said, you guys did not do anything wrong. I mean, if we had to initiate some sort of investigation, I think the person that we would reach out to that has no connection to the city of Killeen is a state authority that oversees that. And they've been here on the ground working with our staff, working with WCID to make sure, okay, what went wrong, what's going on. And they've said, there's really nothing you could have done about this. You might have to change the way you do things from this point on. But, there's just something, as Mr. Reynolds said, chlorinating our water with ammonia and stuff. It's something we've done. We've never anticipated something like this. Neither did TCEQ. Otherwise, they would have made us do this a long time ago. So, all right. Any other questions?
The city of Arthur Heights said that they do dead-end line flushes monthly. Does Killeen do something like that?
Dead end. I'll let Mr. Reynolds. I don't know what that is.
We do dead end line flushes as well. That's most cities do that. We got guys out flushing right now, dead ends. So yes, we do that. That's typical in any water system.
Can you kind of explain what our city maintenance crews do to keep our water tested and maintained weekly and monthly?
Yeah, well, we receive treated water from WCID. But before we push that out into the distribution, we go out there every day and they test this water. They test it Monday through Friday. They test in the water to make sure it's safe and the residual levels are good. That's our responsibility for us, testing that water. We also do what we call a monthly cycle of 120 samples that we pull throughout the city at points that's been approved by TCEQ to be tested on a monthly basis. That goes to the lab, comes back to us, and it goes to TCEQ, and that's what maintains our water rating. We do a quarterly testing to make sure we're doing quarterly testing that's also monitored by the TCEQ. So, and when this issue happened, the TCEQ, as the mayor stated, we called them immediately and got them involved because we wanted oversight. We wanted to know what went right, what went wrong, what can we do to fix this going forward. That's what the bottom line is, trying to figure out how we can fix this going forward to make sure it don't happen, because it's never happened. And so we can say that, okay, you weren't injecting. Well, we weren't injecting for the previous 10 years and we didn't have this issue either. So we have to look at it from both sides. So things happen. Okay, when you're dealing with biofilm and stuff that gets into the water that WCID nor the city of Killeen can control, you're going to have these type of issues. So that's what we had. So, but our crews are out daily. They're out fixing water main breaks. They're out doing water line rehab projects. They're doing a whole lot of things to make sure we have a safe water system. But the safety of the water, which is our primary function as a water division, is to make sure we're going to doing testing to make sure that water is going out to the farthest point at a safe rate. And that rate's been set by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality.
And besides that kind of testing, what else would we anticipate seeing in the future that's going to be different from what we have in the past?
Well, as we said, we'll be doing the nitrification piece. We're going to be doing more of the dead end flushing. We're amping that piece up. We're heightening our testing standards. We're going to go through a nitrification action plan with the TCEQ. At the end of this process, the TCEQ has agreed to come in and give all entities coming off WCID 8-hour block of instructions on creating a better nitrification action plan, which every city is required to have, saying how do you respond when your levels dip. Okay, so when we do this, we're going to get the best training from the experts across the board, so we all speaking the same language. So we should be doing in the future basically similar to what cities around us are doing. So if we have issues or if they have issues, we can share information and we can help pull each other out of that situation before it becomes a dire situation. So that's what the whole 8-hour piece is about, is coordinating and coming together and getting that one big nitrification action plan, then building those separate ones below that we all feed into that big one. Okay?
All right. I think we're good. No more questions? All right, so I appreciate you coming here and doing it such short notice, but I just wanted to make sure that, we try to answer as many questions as you guys have, be as transparent as possible. And lastly, I want to say that I want to thank all the citizens, for their patience. I know it's a huge inconvenience, but I know I get a lot of backlash for what's happening. I know our staff, but ultimately, I'm okay with that as long as we're taking care of our citizens, making sure that safety is number one, and we're not trying to hide this so that we don't get that backlash that we expected we were going to get. Otherwise, as I mentioned earlier, TCEQ comes in and says, you guys are trying to hide something, and we turn a little problem into something much bigger. And so I appreciate you coming out here and putting this information out to the public. So with that,
And I would like to reiterate, too, that the City of Killeen has maintained a superior water rating from the TCEQ since 2019. So the same staff that's monitoring your system now has earned a superior rating from the TCEQ dating back to 2019, and we still maintain that to this day because we've self-reported on everything that ever happened in our water system, and we will continue to do that because we want to maintain that rating.
all right. Thank you.